Hello, hello, friends.
Hello.
Welcome back. We are digging into Ignite After Dark. For those of you who I haven't met before, I'm Jamie. We'll give you a brief rundown on that. But for those of you who are here, if you're in a position where you are able to turn on your camera, I'd sure appreciate that. It's a little bit easier to interact when you've got those cameras on, and I'm going to be asking some questions and looking for your input on some things. So I'd sure appreciate those cameras on. If you're driving or something, I completely understand. But if you are able to, please, please, please do turn that on. Oh, we forgive you, Jeff. That seems like a reasonable reason not to do it. So we'll let that one slide.
I will say that I'm on my gaming rig and I don't have a computer or I don't have a microphone or a freaking camera on this rig. So,
But I'll bet your audio is on point.
I mean, you're in Dolby 7.1 surround sound, so
Well, I'll try not to like cough in your ear or anything because I don't, you might
fine.
hear that loud and clear.
I did have a question on the kind of the attendance, if you will, of the
Yeah.
differing sessions because like some days it's East Coast for me, some days it's West Coast. All that stuff still counts, correct? I mean, it's not
Yeah.
yeah, just for the attendance requirements, if you will.
Yep. In general, they're gonna review both sessions, so you'll get credit regardless. You don't have to always attend one or the other. Great.
Ex-
That's really a good question. So
Excellent.
awesome. All right, looks like we've got quite a few folks on. So again, if you're able to turn on that camera, we are going to do some participation today, and I'd sure love to be able to interact directly with y'all. Tonight we're actually going to do a two banger. So we're going to do a little bit of a combo with two separate Ignite sessions. We're gonna cover the highlights of both of them. So you will get an action-packed evening with me. So, as we dive into that, for those of you who didn't get to meet me last week, my name is Jamie Henley. I am the operations manager here at KWRI, also known as corporate. I am a former MCA and market center tech trainer, so I've worked in market centers before I moved into this role. So definitely like to think I've got a finger on the pulse on both sides of the world. You guys have seen these once or twice, but just want to make sure that you guys get a moment to put eyeballs on those. You can always find them in your book as well. Make sure that we're being TCA compliant. We have vetted all of these materials, and yet things change. Remember that commissions are always negotiable. There's no set limit or set amount or set percentage or any such things. Remember our fair housing rules. As we're moving through some of these things, some of the things we talk about today that's going to be relevant to for sure. And then remember that AI is flawed and imperfect, just like the rest of us. So make sure that you are, if you're using AI for any of the things you are generating, you are proofreading that and double checking those facts. This material has been put together by our KWU team. It has been approved by the folks who have copyrights on the materials here. So please don't take it and run with it unless you gain your own approval there. Whew, that was fun. Did anybody have a good time going through all of the super fun? Yes, thanks. I'm so glad y'all are here to tell me that that was a good time. Don't worry, it'll get more fun from here. Okay. So we're in this kind of fourth and final stage of talking about this, the flow of customers through our pipeline and through you growing your real estate career or launching your real estate career. So in this final phase, we're talking about tonight, we're going to zero in on offers. So we're going to talk about making and receiving offers, and we're going to talk about negotiating offers. So those are the two things that we're going to cover. It's all the offers for all the things this evening. That is what we are going to dig into. Last week, the last thing we talked about was working with buyers and sellers. So we're kind of shifting into that next gear, if you will. All right. Hopefully you all have seen this information before. Can anybody tell me what we call this that's on your screen now?
Y4 C2C, C2Ts.
Yeah, the Y4C2Ts. I promise if you look at it long enough, that makes sense. Okay. So this is our belief system. This is who we are at Keller Williams. One of the things that I find when I look at our Y4C2Ts and this kind of identification of who we are, what our belief system is, and how we come together in culture is that some days one or another of these will kind of step out and be the prevalent factor of the day for me. Or when I'm in a certain transaction or a certain training, I feel like they weave themselves in and out and they become the top priority in my life. With variation, right? It's not always the same one. It's not always win-win is at the top of every situation for me. I find that those kind of ebb and flow a little bit as to which one is kind of the point man, if you will. So when we look at these, what do you think, how do you think this affects the way you do business? Having a belief system and leaning into that, how do you think that affects the way you conduct business and the way you position yourself in real estate? Feel free to unmute or throw it in the chat what your thoughts are there.
For me, it's kind of a confidence inspiring, by having that backing of a moral value system that we all are working towards get together as, overall a company as a team. Um, yeah, it gives me something that I can hold firm on. I like what somebody just said there is about basing the business off of.
Yeah, I like that too. Jeff, I love that this is something that builds confidence in you. And I think Lindsay's exactly right. This gives you kind of a foundation of your business so that you know where to start. This is the roots, right? This is where we come from. And you can build a lot of things on this platform. But when it comes down to it, this is at the core of everything we do. And that's a very helpful foundation to have. When you think about using this in your business, right? So it's something that we base our business off and that gives us confidence in our business. How do you think these things might affect how you work with clients or how you work with other agents? Do any of those in particular stand out in that context?
Integrity always stands out because nobody wants to work with someone that's going to do the wrong thing, whether someone's looking or not.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
that's a great point, Scott. Integrity matters. Integrity matters whether anybody's watching or not. Having that value built into your work and your core is going to make you an easier person to work with and a person that people desire to work with. Great point.
you know,
What else stands out to y'all?
can I add something to that, please,
Please.
Jamie?
Yeah, yeah.
And everyone, this is just my personal opinion, but integrity was one of the core Army values that they teach. LDRSHIP. The I stands for integrity, and I truly believe that unless you maintain your integrity, nothing else matters because you're not going to get anywhere. You're not going to be able to communicate to get a commitment with your customers if you have no integrity. You can't get to the win-win, which is the ultimate end, which is a closing for your buyer, for the seller.
Hmm.
There can't be opportunity for all because no one's going to want to work with you if you don't have integrity. You're never going to have trust, and you'll certainly never achieve success without integrity. Integrity is the primary foundation of everything in life, and it's not just in business, it's in your personal relationships as well. It's not a friggin', yeah, they may not like you because you're integral and you don't want to compromise, but that's their problem because maybe they've never had anyone be that straightforward with them. Okay, I've had my moment.
Man, that is a soapbox that I should have brought the soapbox for you. I think you nailed that, Scott. That's so true that integrity really is a platform that the rest of these can be built on as well. So I love that you called that out. Thank you for that. Zdenka said that it keeps this working within our belief system. Also keeps you in higher standards. So these are the standards we've set for ourselves, and we're trying to meet them and align with them and be in culture with them every day. So we know that we're striving for more, for better, for, checking these boxes in everything we do. And Scott, you said something also there that this isn't just about in our business, right? This is in our lives. We want to be these people every day. This isn't just about putting on a hat, a Keller Williams hat that says, I'm these people when I'm at Keller Williams. The reason that I love Keller Williams is because these are the types of people that I get to work with, right? This is who we are, not just what we do. Really good points there. And Brad said it's a fiduciary roadmap. There you go. You're doing your fiduciary duty if you are following in alignment with our belief system. Really
And
great point. Thank you guys.
I would add also communication would be huge for me. What to say, how to say it, especially working with other agents like you shared with us. I think that's extremely vital. And I'm only a couple weeks into this, so I certainly hope we learn a little bit about that tonight.
Great news, Jerry. You're jumping ahead. Let's talk about what we're going to talk about, right? Well, we are going to talk a little bit about that communication with other agents and doing that right, because it's not always super easy if you don't know how to do it. So we're going to talk about the whole offer process as a whole, just kind of from a high level. We're going to talk about how we prepare that offer. And keep in mind, when we're looking at this, these first several are from a buyer's perspective or a buyer's agent, okay? So we're preparing that offer. We're then going to talk about how we write the offer and present the offer, right? Then we're going to switch off our buyer's agent hat and we're going to put on our listing agent hat, and we're going to talk about how we receive and respond to those offers. And then, of course, we're going to see what y'all got out of that and dive into our daily success system, which, of course, you guys do as homework. We will then go into session 18, but I'm not going to dig into that yet because I don't want to say we're going to do this, and have you guys be overwhelmed. So first, we're going to talk about these offers and these processes here before we dive in too deep. So with that in mind, anything, Jeff kind of, or I'm sorry, Jerry kind of called it out that these presenting the offer and receiving and responding to offers, that's really where we're communicating with the other agents. So those areas are probably going to be really beneficial to you. Anything else that stands out for you or an area that you really want to zero in on? I love that, Jeff. That's how we want everybody's first transaction to go. All right, friends. Well, as we go through this, if at any point y'all do have questions, please feel free to throw it in the chat or feel free to kind of shout it out. I can't always see your hands being raised. So if there's any points that you want me to dig deeper on or questions that you have, please throw them at me, okay? Okay. All right. Now I need a volunteer. Who can read this quote for us? Don't be shy. It'll be fun.
I'll run it. I like to think of sales as the ability to gracefully persuade, not manipulate, a person or persons into a win-win situation.
To gracefully persuade and not manipulate. Well, that sounds like a pretty solid win-win, right? So when it comes to these offers that we're going to talk about, whether it's making those offers, putting them together, or receiving them and responding to them, making sure that we're doing so in a graceful way, right? Where we're coming from curiosity and contribution, and we're never saying shoulda, coulda, woulda been different. That we're approaching everything in that graceful way and creating that win-win situation for both the agents and for our customers, right? Because like Brad mentioned earlier, that fiduciary responsibility you have is about putting your clients top of mind as you're conducting yourself. Okay. All right. So let's zero in on the offer process. What does that actually look like? Okay. This is the basis. And I want you to understand that even though we're looking at this and it looks kind of like a flow chart, right? We see a flow chart here. Keep in mind that this can go down to the bottom, back up to the top, down to the bottom, back up to the top, when depending on what the solution is there in that gray section, there might be that negotiation that happens and then there's another offer. And then we get back down to the bottom, more negotiation. So it can trickle down and come back around. It's not always as simple as step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And it's important to keep that in mind. You can also, if you want to have a visual on this as we're talking, we're going to touch on this one several times. And you're going to find this on page 17.3 of your books. So that might be if you fold down the corner or you bookmark it if you're using a digital copy, something that you'll want to go back to. Okay. All right. So when we're just starting out in the offer process, so before any of these things happen, somebody has found the home, right? They've identified the right one. They're ready to do the thing. How do you think our buyers feel? What kind of emotions are they going through when they're ready to move forward with this process? Throw them in the chat or say them out loud. Panic, fear,
Anxiety.
anxiety,
Definitely
excitement.
anxiety.
Yeah. Sorry, Scott, I missed that.
Most certainly anxiety.
Anxiety, yeah. Excitement, joy. So we've got some kind of really excitement and joy and happiness and kind of this aha revelation. Definitely might be things they're feeling, but panic, fear, nervousness, anxiety, overwhelm, there's kind of this duality of positive feelings and negative feelings, and it's a lot. It's a lot of emotions that can be going on for our clients and our buyers. So what's really important for you in this process is, as you're working with buyers, you need to not be in this super high emotional range. You want to be their rock. You're going to keep calm. You're going to be reassuring. You're in control of the situation. So while you can be happy and excited with them, you don't want to escalate that up here where that energy is really just buzzing at a high level. You want to be the solid in throughout this process, and you do that primarily by being really clear in your communications, right? That's how you show them, hey, I'm in control here. I know what's going on, and I'm going to help you through this, so we can reduce some of that nervousness and that overwhelm and that anxiety. We can kind of tone those down a little bit by being their rock and their solid place, because we've got control. We're letting them know everything that's going on so that they never feel lost. Because if you feel lost, that's not going to make you less anxious or less nervous, is it? So make sure that you communicate regularly. If you let your clients know the cadence of what that's going to look like, then follow that cadence. Communicate with them in the manner that they want to be communicated with. If somebody wants a phone call, try not to be sending them emails all the time, right? If that's not the primary way they want to communicate, keep that in mind. If you're able to, for the fastest and most up-to-date communication, get your buyer clients into your KW app, okay? In your KW app, it's going to update them instantly every time you change a status or check a box that says you completed a checklist item. And that's something that, you know, on the Thursday technology call, they'll go a little bit deeper than that. But I want you to keep in mind that that's the quickest way to get information out in a single step, instead of having to update the thing and then update the client on what's going on. Fair? So this is what that process looks like. And again, can somebody tell me, is this a straight line that this goes through? I see some head shakes. No. I mean, it could be. In an ideal world, we'd love this to be a straight line on our transactions, right? But that's not usually the case. So it kind of has that ability to jump right on back up to the top and filter back down, kind of waterfall down, right? Okay. So now that we know what that process looks like, let's talk about how we prepare the offer. So they found the house, they're ready to do the thing. If you flip to 17.4 in your manual or on your digital copy, we're going to look at the preparation or the prepare to offer checklist. That's what's on your screen here. So I'm going to read through these quickly because I know y'all can read and I know you have them there. So I'm just going to say them real quick. Ensure the property is still available. Build rapport with the listing agent. Inquire about activity on the listing. Inquire about other offers. We're making up words. Offers. Why did they fall through? Ask questions about the seller's motivations and needs. Ask the listing agent how they want to receive the offer. Obtain pre-approval. Review the MLS and tax records. Produce a CMA. Get the seller's disclosure. So these are the things we're going to do before we even get into writing an offer. Okay. So when we look at that, we're kind of gathering information, if you will. We're gathering information and making connection. This is where we're starting to connect with the listing agent, right? So one of the things that we want to find out, so when you look at number 5, if we zero in on number 5, why do we want to ask questions about seller motivations?
I mean, that's going to help you determine price. If they got to move now, I mean, that's going to affect the pricing model that you're going to use to get the, get the unit sold.
Yeah, the level of urgency in how quickly we need to make an offer. Also with number 4, right? If there has been other offers, are there other pending offers? If there was offers, why did they fall through? So if there was, that offer fell through because of XYZ, we want to make sure that XYZ doesn't go into our offer, right? When we look at number 5, what are some of the things that you might find out when asking about, so finding out seller motivations and needs, what are some of the things that you might find out there by talking to the listing agent?
What's the seller's perfect timing as far as moving?
Yeah, what kind of time frame do they, like Jeff said, do we want to do this right now? They've got to go, something urgent has happened, or are they just kind of, this is their 3rd property and it's not their main home, so they're wanting to downsize, but not really urgent in any way. Definitely makes a difference, right? Scott, did you have something else you want to find out there?
Actually, it's funny that we're going over this today, because this was the situation I ended up in on the 27th of last month, and it was my client was in foreclosure, and she got her extension, and in 5 days I had multiple offers and we're under contract. So yeah, it is imperative to find out what's going on with that client and where they're at.
Yeah. Yeah, you've got to know, and you saw it from the other side. And I think that's important too, is ideally the listing agent knows all of these things. They know the situation inside and out because they've done their fiduciary duties. So they should have really good insight for you on that. Why do you think we would do number 6? Why is it important to ask the listing agent how they want to receive the offer?
Maybe they don't have access to a computer. Maybe the internet might be down. Transitioning from home office to the actual brokerage to a home office.
Yeah, that's a great point. So yeah, maybe if we send it in a certain way, they're just not going to see it because of whatever their situation might be. So finding out things like, how do you want to receive it and how do you want me to notify you? So maybe they want the offer submitted through the MLS software, but then they want you to shoot them a text and say, hey, I just submitted an offer, so that they don't miss it while they're in transition or in commute or something like that, right? Yeah. Okay. It's a courtesy to help things run smoothly. Great point, Sandy, right? If I give you what you want, is that going to be good for our relationship or bad for our relationship? If you think that giving me what I want is going to be good for our relationship, give me a thumbs up. Okay. If you think that giving me what I want is going to be bad for our relationship, give me a thumbs down. Great job, guys. You all passed the test. If you give me what I want, it's not going to be a bad thing for our relationship and our working together moving forward, right? So important to find out those things on preferences, both for the seller and for the seller's agent, the listing agent. What are some things that might not be super top of mind that you might want to find out when you're having those initial conversations with the listing agent? So one of the things that pops into my head is HOAs. That may not be on this list, right? It doesn't necessarily say, is there an HOA? But 100%, if your buyer is like, I'm not doing HOA, or it has to have an HOA, then that's got to be a question that if it wasn't listed in the MLS, right? It might be listed in the MLS, but it's not always. Make sure you're finding out that information, because that could be a deal breaker for your folks, right? You don't want to move forward on a property that doesn't fit your buyer's needs because you didn't have the information. Okay. Things like HOAs, like, flood zones. Exactly. That's what I was going to say, Jennifer, is flood insurance or flood zones. If they're in a flood plain, what their insurability is. And if they're in a floodplain, has it ever flooded? That's a great question. Has it flooded before? Because flood zones are not updated every 16 seconds. So while that may have been a floodplain at a time, maybe not now. Assessments pending. Good one. Yeah. all these things that aren't necessarily on this quick list. That's, oh, another good one. Yeah. As is. Is there any repairs possible or adjustment there? Great points, you guys. All those things that, this list is not necessarily 100% comprehensive. You're going to have things in your area that are important for you to find out, and you're going to have things that are important to each and every single buyer that you have that are going to be important to find out. Not every buyer you have is going to say, oh, deal breaker because it's a floodplain, or it's got to have an HOA, or it's got to not have an HOA, right? Keep those things in mind, that this is not the end all be all of the list. Okay. So with that in mind, as we're talking about preparing that offer, what stands out to you? What kind of ahas do you have about in this process? What's important to obtain before we ever move forward with building that offer? What stands out?
Is it available?
Is it available? Boy, that seems like a no-brainer, and yet that could be a factor, right? If they didn't immediately update the MLS, or maybe they have an assistant who's doing the MLS updates, or who knows what, right? The seller could have just talked to them this morning and decided, yep, we want to pull it off the market. Things definitely happen there. So it's a very important question to check out. Honestly, there's probably a reason that one's number one, right? If it's not still available, we don't need to ask the rest of these questions. Okay. All right. Any questions about preparing to write the offer before we ever get in there? Okay. So now we've done the legwork, right? We've done the preparation. We're going to go ahead and start to build this guy. So what does that look like when we go ahead and write an offer? If you flip to page 17.6 and 17.7 in your book, you guys have a copy of this as well. But these are, it's a little more extensive, right? These are all the boxes we want to check as we're writing an offer. Okay. And again, this is something that you're going to want to, in your area, there may be additional things. There may be things like that, the HOA factor. There may be things like the floodplain. So keep in mind that, again, this is not the most comprehensive list that has ever listed in the history of all time. Okay. So again, that's on page 17.6 and 17.7. So these are the things we want to include in the offer that we're writing. Okay. Price and terms, the seller's disclosure, conveyances, earnest money, the due diligence and inspection period, time for seller acceptance, financing terms, pre-approval letter, closing date, home warranty, clarity, repair limits, special clauses, and any addenda that are going to be necessary. Okay, that's what we want to include in there. What should we not submit with an offer? A letter. Great job, Jennifer. A lot of agents protected information, which generally, Scott, a lot of times happens in those letters. Those we like to call them love letters, right? Do y'all know what I'm talking about when we say the love letters? This is a, hey, this is who I am. This is why I want it. This is why I'd be the perfect buyer for your home. We call them love letters. Do you know what the National Association of Realtors calls them? NAR has a different name for them. It's not love letters. NAR calls them liability letters, because you can't write about how you're the perfect buyer for this house because of your situation without disclosing that protected information that Scott talked about, right? There's really no way to do that without getting into fair housing issues. So, when we're talking about our family status or our age, all of these things that we would put into this letter to tell them why we're so perfect, all of them are violations of fair housing. So as much as that may seem like such a great idea to a lot of our buyers, please provide them that guidance that those things could get them and you into a pickle. So you definitely do not want to include. The buyer could potentially, unlikely that the buyer would necessarily get themselves in trouble because they are not a regulated entity in the same way that a licensed agent is. So they couldn't get in trouble with the Department of Regulatory Agencies because they're not a regulated agency or employee or title. So, okay. So when we look at this, these are the things that the seller needs that we include in the offer. They're the things that they need to know to be able to make an informed decision, right? If we include all of these things and somebody else makes an offer that maybe has the same terms but doesn't have all of these things included, we've got a better offer, right? So if we make sure that we're being inclusive of all of these things in our initial send, then potentially just by having a more comprehensive offer, we have a better offer. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. So the other thing that I think is really important that when we're writing an offer becomes important to do is to make sure that your buyer understands the pieces of the contract, right? They understand what's all included in there, the timelines, the dates and deadlines that have ramifications, right? If you don't do this by this date, then XYZ could happen. You could have the opportunity to lose the contract, or it could fall through, things like that. So really important to keep to ensure that your buyers have a pretty solid idea of what's included in that contract. Okay. All right. So once we've checked all those boxes, we've written the offer. We're going to go review that contract with our buyer and let them know here is the things we've put in the offer and how they apply in the contract, right? Why it's relevant in our offer. Make sure they fully understands, hit the key components there. Make sure that you're double clicking on things like price, closing dates, inspection dates, any of those dates that have a ramification if something is not met. If there's any contingencies written in, going through those, what else is coming along with the property if that's the case. If you have not ever gone through a contract in this way, like written an offer, either a real offer or just a dummy offer, go through that process yourself. Review the contract top to bottom and walk through, what does this mean, right? What does this price mean in regard to the deal? What dates are associated with what, and what does that mean? What happens on that date? What has to be submitted by that date? So that you have a really clear understanding. And then do this with your broker or your coach and have them walk through it and talk it through from that perspective. So that you have both the understanding internally and you have that outside opinion on how they see things, having done this for a longer period of time, right? So if you do these things, if you check all the boxes on your offer checklist, right? So we've checked all our boxes there. We've reviewed the contract with the buyer so they really understand what it means as we're making that offer. That helps you not make those rookie mistakes, right? We don't want to look like we don't get it. So having that understanding of the contract and having our buyer understand those things as well is going to be really important to making sure we don't back ourselves into a corner of lack of understanding. Okay. Something to keep in mind, and I think it's one of the later items on the checklist is, so number 13, addenda. there may be an addendum or multiple addenda that are required in your state or in your county or in your municipality, or there may be ones that are kind of standard that maybe aren't required but are standard use. Make sure you know what those are. So again, chat with your broker about what that is so you make sure that you're including those. Because again, leaving out any sort of required addenda is going to make you look like you missed a step, or you might that'd be kind of one of those rookie mistakes, is to leave something out that's pretty standard for somebody to respond in. Another key thing to make sure that you're really cognizant of in your area, and again, talk to your broker, is going to be timelines. So things like, once you submit the offer, how long do they have to accept or respond to the offer? How long do they have if the appraisal comes in low? What's the adjustment time that's kind of standard in your area? Making sure that you're not writing in 7 days on something that's usually a 24-hour turnaround, again, is just going to be helpful to make you look like you know your stuff. Okay, so avoid making those rookie mistakes. Okay. Examples of special clauses. Esther, that's a tough one. I will say, because there is many, and they vary by state, and they vary by county, and they vary by city. So there's potentially clauses built in. There's potentially addenda that it could be one or the other. So things like, let's see what pops in my head. Mineral rights. That's a standard addendum that is kind of generally used when you're talking about farm and ranch property, when you're talking about certain areas. A lot of areas in Texas, mineral rights is going to be something that's going to be a standard thing. Water rights, similar where you've got water or well rights to groundwater. That might be something that's going to be prevalent in certain areas. Like, for example, here where I live outside of the municipality, and I'm on a well. So the water conveyance rights are something that's going to be important. Whereas if you lived in the city, that's on the city water system. So that's not necessary. So things like that are going to be important for you to keep in mind, especially on transactions that are, you generally run into a lot of things like that when you're in more suburban or rural. You sometimes are going to run into more addenda because of things like that, right? You're not going to have mineral rights very often in town. You're not going to have water rights. You might have vertical or land rights, or height restrictions and things like that might be included. But things like that are things you'll want to look into. Check with your broker, Esther, for in your specific area, what some of those things that come up at least relatively regularly are going to be for you. Because there definitely is things that are going to be at least semi-regular in your area. Okay, and it just varies so much by different areas. Okay. All right. So now we've kind of got our data together. We've done the legwork. We've written the offer and reviewed it, right? So we've written up this contract. We've gone through it with our buyer. Now, what are we going to do next? We're going to present the offer. So when we present the offer, this is hopefully not the first time that we've interacted with the listing agent, because hopefully as we were preparing the offer, we asked them some questions. But this is the first time that we're going to have a contract situation with them. Important that we've done a little bit of legwork and hopefully have some sort of connection with them at this point to make this a little smoother for them. we're going to look at page 17.9, and surprise, there's a checklist, right? So when we are presenting the offer, we want to double check that you have all the documents. Again, don't leave out those addenda or amendments that are common or necessary in your area. Make sure you're following the instructions, submitting them in the way that the listing agent asked you to, making sure all of the blanks are filled and things are labeled accordingly. Don't send page 4 and then page 2 and then 1 and 3, right? Make sure that when we're sending them, they're in a logical order. And then you might attach those to an email that says, hey, here is what the offer looks like. Somebody said that they have a specific email that they send when they send that out. And I'm sorry, I didn't see who it was, and now I can't find it. So, but then, again, notify the listing agent. This is something I touched on earlier. So maybe that gets submitted through the MLS or submitted through email or however that goes. But then maybe you shoot a text over and just say, hey, listing agent, I sent this over. Just wanted to make sure that you don't miss it, or whatever that looks like. And then we're going to add all those documents to the opportunities section of our command. So we have all those documents front and center, and our broker can review those. And then consult with your buyer. Make sure you've dotted all the T's and crossed all the I's, or the opposite of that, which makes far more sense. Make sure that this says what they want it to say before we submit it, that we're really hitting their terms. Okay. Again, especially when we're writing that email summary, make sure that that doesn't lean in the direction of the love letter also. That's who it was. Thanks, Tony. You have the email that's dedicated to those offers, to sending those offers out. If you're not sure what should be included on there, I believe that is on page 17.9. There's an email template that you guys can use. So if you don't already have one built out, pop onto page 17.9 and just adjust that one to fit your needs, because it's going to give the information and kind of a summary without stepping into those potentially fair housing issues that you can run into when you start throwing around personal information. Okay. Okay. We've done a lot of authorization here. So we've done the legwork, we've done the preparation, we've written up that offer, reviewed it with our buyer, and now we're presenting it to the listing agent. What ahas do you have about what that process looks like? Go ahead and unmute or throw it in the chat.
I have a question, Jamie.
Yeah.
Could you do me a favor and just share with me? Let's say you're going to make a phone call or interact with another agent that has a listing. Like, what does that conversation look like? That y'all want to want to present an offer. Like, what would that look like for you?
So you're as the buyer's agent, and as you're preparing it, or once you've gone ahead and submitted it?
Preparing it, like, reaching out to, check on the property. Like, what does that first sentence or two start like? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think number one, the fact that you're doing the reaching out is number one. I think that's what's most important, is that you're making the reach out and saying. You could even say something like, you put me on the spot, Jerry. Now I've really got to think about it. Like, I have to have a conversation in my head real quick.
All good.
So maybe it's something like, hey, Jerry, I've got a buyer who's interested in the property you have listed at 123 Main Street. We're looking at putting in an offer. Anything that I really need to know about that property or about your seller specifically, and then kind of let them take it from there. And then when you go back to that checklist, when we go to the preparing an offer checklist, that's going to give you some kind of follow-up questions. I would just start with, hey, I'm excited. I've got a buyer who is ready to make an offer. What do I need to know? and let them tell you. And then if they don't tell you things that are important to your buyer, the HOA things, the floodplain things, the all those things that we talked about earlier, then you can call those out specifically. If there has been any previous offers on it that did not fall or did not pan out, they fell through, you can ask those more specific questions. But the easiest way to kind of initiate that is just to say, you tell me, man.
Okay. And then
That sound
first,
fair?
yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, and I would disclose that, I'm a real estate agent with Keller Williams. You say that first, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Hmm.
I just want to make sure. Thank you for that. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Sorry, brand new. Thank you.
That's all right. And I made some assumptions there, Jerry, that we already knew this agent also. And so that's my bad on my part. I should have led with, my name is Jamie Henley, and I'm with Keller Williams, whichever brokerage I am. And I've got a buyer who's interested. I didn't, because I made some assumptions that for some reason we already knew this person.
No, all good. No, beautiful. Thank you so
Good,
much. That's
good call out.
exactly what I needed. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Jamie.
Hi, is it Rianne or Ryan?
It's Ryan.
Did you have a
Jamie,
question or did you have an aha?
I do have a quick question.
Yeah.
So today I'm fairly new also, and today I was kind of playing on the Keller Williams offering site. Are we gonna kind of go over that today, and also everything we talked about that we just discussed? Is that where we're also putting it in this platform?
So Keller Offerings is a totally, it's an outside community that is available, but none of the things we're talking about today necessarily would go into Keller Offerings. Where we track our progress and our contacts and our kind of pipeline of transactions that's going on is going to be in the Keller Williams command system, Ryan.
Okay,
The
that's good to
offerings is,
know.
yeah, it's a whole different kind of ball game. That's some things that are available, but not necessarily your everyday. It's kind of an option we have to be able to offer to folks, but not something we would necessarily use every day.
Sounds great. That's good to know, because I was confused when I saw this platform. I was like, I don't even know how to use it, but there's thousands of videos for command. So that makes complete sense. So I appreciate that clarity there.
Yeah, absolutely. Command is going to be your very best friend.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jamie.
Absolutely. Okay, looks like we have a couple of ahas over in the chat. Lindsay said communication with all parties is the key to success. 100%. And I would even elaborate on that and say communication in the way they want to be communicated with is going to be even more key to success, right? So making sure that we are getting information from the listing agent to give to the buyer, and then getting information on what the buyer needs to be able to give back in that offer. Really, really important. Being diligent with the details makes you stand out from other agent. Yeah, 100%. When you're asking about things like, we keep circling back to like the HOAs, to the floodplains, things like that, you're asking questions that make it obvious that you know what your buyer wants, right? It makes you stand out because you have questions about things that are obviously important, and that's going to help the listing agent also be aware that you know your stuff and you know what you're doing.
Hey,
Okay.
Jamie, I had a
Yes, ma'am.
question for you. Okay, so as far as like the most current and as far as going back to the communication, so it's been a while since I've been really, very involved with things. I'm just kind of getting back into things again. And
Excellent.
as far as the apps, there's like a few more apps that I've noticed. So like, which KW app are you talking about having your clients use? And is the KW command app, that one obviously is probably more recent than the first that I mentioned, but which apps do you recommend as far as communication, and what's going to be helpful in your experience or what you've heard?
Yeah.
That's my question.
A good tech question. And this is something that they'll talk more about on Thursday night. So I'm just going to go high level. The KW command app. So that's going to be a white circle with a red logo. That's where you're going to, that's your app. That's where you do your things. You talk to, you keep your CRM, you move your opportunities, things like that. The KW app is, that's the consumer facing app. And it is a red background with a white logo on it, just in kind of visual distinction. I'm double checking myself here. But that is, so the command app is white circle, red logo, and then the KW, they're both white with red. The command one has a red box, whereas just the one that says KW is going to be white background with just the KW letters, and it's called the KW app. That is client facing. The command app is for you. That's agent facing.
The KW app, Tony just said, he said reverse it. I don't know what he meant by that, but also the KW app is where you can look at wherever you're driving around. You can say, oh, these listings. So what I guess my question, I should have been more specific. Like some of these other, whatever home search apps that people do that
Yeah.
they download and they, you know, they become a realtor themselves. Is the KW app pretty, I mean, is it current? Is it more accurate as far as like what's pending, whatever?
Yeah, so the KW app pulls directly from the MLS. We have an integration with local MLSs. So it's as up to date as the information that our agents put into the MLS. So hopefully the answer is yes, it's extremely up to date, and you know, it's only as up to date as we physically can have the information, right? If the agent doesn't update a status, then the status isn't going to be updated, but it syncs. I want to say like every 1 to 3 minutes or something crazy pants like that. So it's very current information that syncs directly with local MLS. You're welcome. Sorry, I misunderstood the question. So I got to answer 2 questions for the price of 1. Boom. All right. Any other ahas you have about building and going over and making this offer as a buyer's agent? Okay. So I mentioned earlier, we're now going to take off our buyer's agent hat and we're going to put on our listing agent hat, and we're going to flip to the other side of this transaction. So we're going to talk about how we receive and respond to offers from a listing perspective. I know you're shocked to hear it, but there is in fact a receive and review offer checklist. These checklists can be really helpful, especially for your first few transactions. You can find this checklist on page 17.11. And these are the things that once you receive that offer, you want to go ahead and do to move forward. What are your responsibilities as the listing agent when it comes to offers? Okay, so as you look at this, if we don't go into like the specifics, what are the high level responsibilities of the listing agent in regards to an offer and communication? A couple of them we've said a couple of times. I think Brad said it earlier. That fiduciary responsibility, right? Making sure that we're acting in the best interest of our clients. What else might be our responsibility as a listing agent when it comes to an offer? No wrong answers, friends, I promise. Let's go ahead and unmute or throw it in the chat.
Making sure the numbers are accurate.
Yeah, reviewing for accuracy. If they say they're gonna, I'm trying to come up with some numbers to throw out, but like making sure that, you know, if it says we're making an offer for 100,000, that then what's listed as the price is $100,000 in the offer. making sure that we review those to make sure that it makes sense, that we're not saying, oh, $1,000 over here. That's obviously not something, missing a zero is definitely something that can happen. So just double checking. One of our other duties when we're a listing agent is just the whole idea of timeliness, right? We don't want to sit on all these offers and not tell our clients that there's offers coming in. We want to make sure that we're communicating with them as they come in, letting them know so that they can make an informed decision that meets their needs. And then, of course, especially when you look at kind of that initial conversation that as a listing agent, we're having with the buyer's agent, really, really, really important to keep in mind that confidentiality is super important, right? Making sure that you're not sharing personal client information as we're having those conversations. We can talk about the motivations and things like that, but we don't need to say, Jamie's selling her home because she's going through a messy divorce or she just got a cancer diagnosis, right? Those things are not appropriate for us to be sharing. That confidentiality of our client is going to be really important. Okay. All right. Looks like a couple other things in the chat. The biggest thing that Jennifer sees new agents miss is personal property. One agent missed that the buyer's agents snuck in the washer and dryer convey with the house, and they didn't put it in the MLS that the washer and dryer conveyed. And so the agent ended up paying for it since she missed it. So yeah, double checking what's listed. And that goes along with, I think it was Ryan that said it, with checking the numbers, right? Checking the numbers and checking the MLS in comparison to what's been written up. Okay. Lindsay says, making sure that your client understands the offer. Yeah, and even before we get to making sure our clients understand the offer, make sure you understand the offer, right? Is there something that makes you go, huh? Get clarity on that before we go ahead and present this to the seller. Okay. And then you are going to handle the money. Yes, yes, yes. And doing a net sheet. We're actually going to talk a little bit more about that here in a little bit, Jennifer, about those net sheets. Okay. So again, that receive and review offer checklist, something to just, the first couple of times you're going through a transaction from the listing side, just go through this and make sure that you're kind of holding yourself accountable to these things. So making sure the offer is complete. There's not pages missing. There's not addenda missing. There's not forms missing. Confirm receipt of the offer. Know what is required in your state. So in some states, there is there has to be timestamps involved on when it was received by the listing agent, when it was opened by the listing agent, and a timestamp on when it was presented to the client. Make sure you're aware of what those requirements are for you. Making sure we get those to the seller in a timely manner. Create kind of a high-level overview, a summary. Call the buyer's agent, especially if there's any questions, to just get clarity on that. Potentially calling the lender. Again, this depends on state requirements on if this is something that you're allowed to do in your state to verify the pre-approval letter, which hopefully, of course, was included. And then create kind of the boxes that you want to make sure an outline for what you're going to go over with your clients. And this becomes especially important, especially when we have multiple offers, making sure that we're providing the same information to our clients for each one of those offers, right? So maybe having something like a checklist or a spreadsheet where that's visible to you, and potentially even sharing that directly with your client, again, depending on what the regulations are there. That might be something that is going to be really important. Okay. When we look at number 3, when we're sharing things with our seller in a timely manner, something I want you to keep in mind is that this can be a little bit, timely can mean one thing to somebody and another to another person. So make sure that when we say timely, that's based on the seller's expectations. So if they want to know every time an offer comes in immediately, then let them know immediately. If they want an update at the end of each day with any offers that came in that day, then you give them an update once a day, right? So make sure that we are sure what those timelines look like for the communication that our seller wants from us so that we can make sure we're reaching and exceeding those expectations for them. Okay. Okay. Remember that as we are, we're doing number 4 and we're doing number 7 and we're setting that up to present it to our client, make sure that we are presenting data, right? Facts, not about the family or the situation, but about the content of the offer, the terms of the offer, to make sure that we're not stepping into those uncomfortable fair housing issues that could become a problem. Okay. Okay. So Jennifer mentioned in the chat a net sheet. Has anybody else heard of a net sheet or done a net sheet? Okay. So a few folks have at least heard of that, if not done it. We're going to lower my hand. That's not necessary. Okay. So in a net sheet, this is basically taking the written price of the offer and running the math on the what's what that's going to come out of that, so that the seller has an idea of what their net profit is going to look like. So when we think about, let's call the offer, that's going to be the gross, right? That's their gross potential income from this deal. It's the offer price. We want to get to the net. What are some of the things that you might subtract out of that, out of the offer price, to get to a net dollar figure? What are some of those things that might get subtracted?
Closing costs and title fees.
Yeah, closing costs, depending on who pays those and what's written, depending on the offer, that might go to buyer, that might go seller, it might get split. So make sure that's clear. And did you say title fees, Sandy?
Yes.
Yep. And what it costs to run your title fees, those are both going to get taken out. Jennifer says if they've got a mortgage loan, right? So what's the payoff amount on that loan? Attorney fees, if depending on where you're filing or if there's been an attorney involved. Commissions, taxes, recording fees, wire fees, prorated things like HOAs and taxes, closing costs, home warranties, all really good points. Yeah, all of these are things that come out of that high level number, the offer number or the gross number. And we want to make sure that we're clear with our sellers that, maybe if the offer comes in at 500,000, that doesn't mean you're going to get 500,000 at the vast majority of the time, right? So really making sure that we have a full explanation and discussion with our sellers about what that net sheet looks like and what the actual number is, that they are going to receive in profit. Really, really important. Okay. Okay. All right. Any questions about this kind of flip side, this listing side, and how we're receiving those offers and creating that net sheet? Okay. Okay. So once you've got that in, you've received the offer, it's ready to move forward. You're going to want to put that information into command as well. Now, again, on Thursday nights, you get to dig deeper into some of that technology. So that's something I'm not going to go deep into here. So we're still wearing our listing agent. We've put everything into command. We put our documents in there in our opportunities. Now a decision has to be made, right? So we've talked through kind of analyzing the offer and sharing it with our, and so now we're going to go ahead and share it with our sellers, right? So again, we need to have that conversation, talk about the real numbers, highlight the pertinent information, highlight the things that are different, especially again in multiple offer situations. Make sure we're highlighting the differences in the offers, so that they're aware of what those key components are. You know, what are the closing dates? What are the offer prices? Are there any contingencies? All of those things are really important for your seller to have full visibility on, as well as that net sheet on what that's going to look like with each offer that they receive. Okay. Okay. So once we present that to our seller, you're going to help them come to the conclusion, right? You're not going to say, I think this is the best one necessarily. You're not going to say, this is what I would do necessarily. You're going to help them come to a conclusion. Okay. And there's 3 different conclusions we can come to, right? So those 3 different conclusions are the gray boxes that you see on your screen. Your 3 options are: the seller can either counter the offer that's been made. Okay. If you look at 17.14, there's a kind of definition of each one of these that I'm going to share with you. So if we can counter the offer, that means that your client says, I like some of this, but I don't like all of this. Could we switch this up? And then you rewrite that offer using the correct form, depending on where, what state you're in. That may be very, very specific, and make sure that gets signed and resubmitted to the buyer's agent. Okay. So that counter, right? This is, I like some of it, not all of it. Could we make a few tweaks and send it back? That's what a counter is. Your client has the option to accept the offer, right? They like the offer, it's reasonable. An important thing to keep in mind is that when your client accepts an offer, then once they sign it, they're under contract. So just an important clarification, that your seller understands that once you sign it and you say yes to the offer, you are under contract. You can't keep shopping, if you will, to find the right offer for you. Okay. And then the third option is that your client, the seller, says, nope, this just doesn't work for me. There's nothing about this that's going to work. You can then, the buyer has a chance to completely start over and rewrite an offer, or they continue, or your seller continues looking at other offers from other folks, right? So there's really only 3 responses to an offer. They're either going to counter the offer and ask for some small changes or large changes, depends on the counter. They're going to accept the offer and say, let's do this thing and go under contract, or they're just going to flat out reject it and say, no, I don't need to change anything. The answer is no. Okay. Something to keep in mind, especially when we're looking at rejection of offers, is that it's really important that we have clarity on what our seller is okay with us sharing. So make sure that when we're having conversations with the buyer's agent, say we reject, our seller rejects an offer, make sure you check with your seller on whether you can share details of why the offer was rejected, right? Things like, if is your seller okay with you sharing that that same buyer could make another offer with different terms? Okay. Just make sure that you have clarity on what your seller is okay with you sharing with the other parties. Okay. Any questions about those 3 different options of a response from our sellers and how we get there? So one of these things is going to happen. They counter the offer. That's negotiation. If they accept the offer, then we begin the contract to close process. If they reject the offer, then that offer ends right there. Okay. And then you want to check with your seller and see if they're okay with accepting a different, right? If the answer is no because they want to pull it off the market, obviously they're not looking for a different or better offer. Okay. 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 But my clicker is not clicking. Okay, like I said, we're doing 2 different sessions. So before we dive into ahas on this first section, if you would be so kind as to do a quick rating on the content of this session before we dive into the second one, if you'll scan that magical quick response code on your screen or go to kwueval.com and you'll have some options that pop up there. The event type for this one is online or virtual. That should be in the drop down. However, my name is not in the drop down. So when it comes to instructor, you're going to say the instructor is not in the drop down, darn it. And you're going to type in my name, Jamie Henley. And then, of course, the name of this course is Ignite 17, Make and Receive Offers. I'm going to give you just a minute to fill that out and grab a drink of water if you want before we go ahead and review our ahas and do a quick little role play.
Hi, Jamie.
Hi, Mina.
This is Mina. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. I have a question. If I send an offer and one of the addendum are missing, I forget to attach it, what will happen to that offer? Is it not valid? What will happen?
It depends, Mina, on a few things. Number one, it depends on if that's a required addendum in your area. If it's required, generally, the listing agent might notify you, right? They might say, hey, this is missing. We need that to complete the offer. If it's something that's required, they can't fully present that offer, right? They don't have the full package essentially to present to their seller. So it depends a lot on the listing agent. They could still make the offer, but instruct their seller not to sign until they have the full package. Or if it's not an addendum that's required, it's just kind of a standard addendum, then that might be something that they add in as they potentially could make a counter that includes the addendum, or as they, I guess at that point they wouldn't necessarily accept the offer without either adding in the addendum in a counter or just making the request to you and saying, hey, Mina, I think you missed this guy, if it's something that's required.
All right, thank you. So it will not kind of void the offer usually, or it will. Like if there's, for example, they say we review all the offers by like end of today at 9 p.m. So if one of, for example, 22F is missing, the finance is missing, what will happen? Like, what is the usual thing? Like, do they get back to me, or do they just ignore my offer? Does
This
it
is
like just depends to the
It
selling
really
agent?
depends on the listing agent, honestly, Mina. I would like to think in our world where we have our Y4C2Ts that would be something that as Keller Williams agents we would say, hey, you know what? Looks like this thing was missing. Did you want to go ahead and get that in so I can present your full offer to my client? But potentially you could have a listing agent that, says this isn't a full offer and I'm not willing to present it. I would like to think that would be a rare occasion, because if the listing agent is acting in their fiduciary duty, they want to, they need to be able to present that offer to their client. And so, just saying, hey, I need this missing piece would be the kind of most appropriate response, but it potentially could void it if the listing agent and or the seller said, we're only taking complete packages as offers. I think that would be an unusual circumstance, though.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Okay. All right, friends. So hopefully you got to stretch your legs a little, grab a drink. Thank you for submitting those reviews for us. What ahas do you have about this whole making and receiving offers situation? So from kind of put on both of your hats now, what are the most impactful things that you learned about making and receiving offers in the front half of this call? Yeah, Jennifer, great point. When you're on both sides, pay attention to the details. We talked about some of the things like making sure the numbers match, making sure the blanks are filled out, making sure you include the appropriate addenda, making sure that signatures are where signatures are supposed to be, paying attention to the details. Really great point. What else? Yeah. Making sure you understand and making sure it's clearly written. And Lindsay, I would say this is a both sides kind of thing as well, right? When you're presenting that offer, you're putting together an offer, making sure it's what your buyer really wants, and that it just makes sense in the way it's conveying through that contract offer. And then when you're on the seller side, when you're the listing agent, making sure that you have clarity on what is being offered there so that you can clearly present it to your seller. And that's why some of those emails, again, there's that email template that we shared, can be really helpful in that, and just saying, here's the contract with all the details, here's the highlights spelled out for you in that email summary that we send. Making sure that's clear. Okay. Okay. So in the first half here, we talked about the overall offer process. Oh, Tony, thank you. The order of collecting information and making sure the information is accurate. So when you're the buyer's agent up front, you're collecting information, right? You're talking to the listing agent and getting the information before you ever put in that offer, and then getting more information potentially after that. And again, making sure that information is clear and accurate. Okay. Okay. So we've looked at this whole offer process. We looked at preparing and writing that offer from a buyer's agent perspective. And then we looked at it from the listing agent perspective when we're receiving that offer and how we're helping our clients respond to it. Okay. And then we discussed kind of the three outcomes that can go from there. Whew! The words are hard this evening, friends. Okay. So now as we move into the next session, like I said, you get the two banger tonight. We're going to talk about that negotiation of these offers. So now that you all have this ability to make and receive offers, let me ask you a couple questions. Okay. So now everybody has really zeroed in on the communication and the clarity. And now that you have that, do you feel like you have more clarity on how to communicate with buyers as a buyer's agent, with sellers as a listing agent, and with the other agent in this initial offering process? Do you feel like you have a clearer idea of that? Can I get a thumbs up or a thumbs down? So thumbs up if you feel like you're better prepared now. Thumbs down if you are so confused and you just have lots and lots of questions. Okay. There's like thumbs exploding on my screen right now. It's very exciting stuff. I love the interactive emojis that do exciting things. All thumbs. Jokes. Love it. Okay. So now, do you feel like you have a better grasp of how to make and receive the offers, to go through that process? Thumbs up if you feel like you have a much better understanding of going through that process from both sides. Thumbs down if you're very confused and you have questions. Woo, more exploding thumbs. Okay, excellent. So before we dive into this negotiation, one thing that I want to reiterate is you probably don't have crystal clarity on that process, and this is okay. Be sure to talk to your broker or your coach to get clarity on the specifics in your area, right? If there is required addenda, if there is standard forms that are submitted with X, Y, or Z, talk to your broker and your coach who are going to have a good solid idea of what those are so that you're checking those boxes on both sides of the transaction. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and dive into the second half of our session today, which is negotiating those offers. So this is going to be in the scenario of if we didn't just say yes to the darn thing. Okay. So we're going to start by just kind of identifying what negotiation means. What are we doing when we talk about negotiation? We're going to dig into the 3 P's of negotiation. We're going to get some tips and tricks for how to have successful negotiations. And then we're going to make sure that we've covered all your bases and your questions are answered before you dive into that daily success system. Okay? So with knowing that this is what we're looking to cover, are there any questions or any specific details that you can think of that you want to know more about? If you'll put it in the chat so we can make sure that we get those touched on. Anything about negotiation that's going to be important for you today? I'll give you just a minute here. All of it. Jerry wants to know it all. I'm with you, Jerry. Tell me more is always my motto. Okay. All right. Can somebody read the quote on the screen for me, pretty please, with cherries on top?
Negotiating is not something to be avoided or feared. It's an everyday part of life.
Thank you very much, Jerry.
Yes, ma'am.
It is an everyday part of life. Halloween just happened for most of us. So if you celebrate Halloween, there is likely some negotiating that might be going on in your house. Right now, the negotiation for my children is, can I have 4 pieces or 5 pieces of candy before I eat my dinner? Then I got to barter with them, right? I've got to learn this art of negotiation. What if we have the candy after dinner and we make it 1 piece? We usually end up somewhere in the middle, right? That's negotiation though, right? This isn't only something that happens in the real estate world. I'm negotiating with my children all the time. When you are negotiating, Brad wins. He took it to a whole new level. Let me tell you the negotiation that happens around those 2 numbers in my house. Mostly that negotiation is, how do I make you stop? Right? Well played, sir. Well played. All right. So Jerry says that that negotiation is a part of everyday life. So I want you guys to think about in your head, as you think about that this is not something to be avoided or not something to be feared, do you have any fears or any anxiety about negotiation? And if so, what might be the limiting beliefs that you have centered around negotiation? And I'm asking you to be a little bit vulnerable here. That's why we're doing this at the second half of this call when we're all good friends. But tell me if there's something that makes you a little nervous about negotiating. What limiting beliefs do you have there? Go ahead and throw those in the chat, please.
I don't know that it was necessarily anything that had to do with, okay, for me, I always viewed it as battle.
Battle?
It's not battle,
Yeah.
right? And that's one of the things that I do like about how we handle those things here specifically at this company is that it is in fact, both of us coming to terms like that first deal I talked about. It was both of us coming to good terms for both of our clients. And the feedback I got from the listing agent later was that client, her client, was extremely happy with the deal that was presented. My clients are extremely happy with their deal. It's not battle.
Yeah. I like the wording of that actually, Jeff, this idea of battle, because in a battle, there is a winner and a loser. And that's not necessarily the outcome we want here, right? We want to come to a collaborative decision so that it becomes a win-win. So both of our clients get to a situation that makes sense. So that negotiation is not making a winner or a loser. It's finding the right place for both to make that win. Okay. Tony, tell me more about getting or not getting the best deal for your client.
Well, I mean, it kind of feels like I'm more worried about not getting the best deal for my client. Somebody says, well, we want to close on this day, or they want to close in 45 days. My seller needs to close in like 30 days, just for an example. And we go back and forth, and we end up closing like in 40 days. So it kind of feels like my seller's not getting the best deal, even though they're selling the house. I just want to make sure I get the best deal for my client.
Sure.
I'm still trying to get a win-win, but that's my biggest fear is like, well, I should have been able to got this for my client, even though like for example, the last transaction I had, we had a vacant lot on the market for 35,000, and it was worth 35,000, but because of the first offer that came in, they bid at 25,000. So my client was ready to get rid of the lot, so they accepting a $25,000 bid when they could have countered back and got at least 30, but they just went ahead and settled for the 25,000. So I kind of felt like I didn't get the best deal for them.
Yeah.
But they was ready to move on.
Yeah. So Tony, I think kind of what you're saying is maybe sometimes you have a little bit of fear of disappointing or not getting the best for your clients. Is that kind of what your negotiation holdback might
Yes.
be sometimes?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Jerry said not wanting to leave money on the table. Okay. I think all of these are valid and real. And as we become better and better at negotiating and finding that win-win, we recognize that sometimes the picture of winning that we have in our head isn't really what winning looks like, right? It's not always the Air Jordan dunk. That's not always what winning looks like. And sometimes we have to take a step back and make sure that we're having those real clear communications with our clients so that we are finding what they're comfortable with to come with the win-win for them and not saying, well, I could do better for you, and trying to get to that the ideal picture in your head of what a win looks like, because we're using our fiduciary qualities to make sure that we're doing what's right by the client, right? So all of those really, really good points. Okay, so I've got another question for you. Who's ever bought a car? Raise your hand if you've bought a car. Congratulations. Well done, Hot Wheels. Okay. So most people raise their hand. For those of you who have bought a car, which I think is everybody, Has anybody ever negotiated when they bought a car? Any negotiations happening there? Okay, a few. Okay, definitely. I think we've got some yeses and some nos. So car purchases are definitely an area where people tend to negotiate because it's a high value item, right? Where there's a lot of money that's changing hands there, and it's something that you're going to own for a long period of time. So high dollar and high timeline sort of factors here. So when we think about that as as we think about buying and selling homes, we're looking at an even bigger purchase for an even longer time, right? So that's why negotiating is important, because this is, again, it's a lot of money changing hands for a long timeline. So it's an important decision. This isn't a short-term effect that that deal is going to have on this person's life. Okay. Negotiation is definitely an important part of what we do. So, and we talked about this in an earlier session, but the National Association of Realtors said that as we're looking at the top things that clients are looking for in an agent, both buyers and sellers, one of the top things they are looking for in an agent is someone who has strong negotiating skills. Okay, that's one of the top skills that your clients are looking for. So you want to make sure that you've got those skills to be able to meet them where they are. Okay. So let's talk about what this darn thing is. Okay, what is negotiation? Negotiation, words are hard, friends. Okay. All right. So negotiation is this process of bargaining, the give and take, the reaching collaboration to coming to a conclusion, to find a common acceptable ground, right? It is kind of the process of locating the win-win, if you will. Okay. So when it comes to negotiation, there is two routes, if you will, that an offer can take. So you either have the offer, which is then accepted, and then that's the end of that. We move into the contract to close process, right? We move on down the line. Or if we have an offer that's either rejected or countered, then we get into this cycle of negotiation. Y'all, I don't know why this word is not working with me today. Negotiation. And we stay in this circle of negotiation until we either reach a rejection or an exception. If it's rejected, where do we go? If the negotiation gets rejected, where do we go? One of two places, right?
Either back to the table or move on.
Yeah, you either go back into this circle of negotiation, or you go to a place where you say, you know what? Maybe not the right situation or the right offer for us to move forward with. So again, if that offer then after negotiation becomes accepted, we move into the contract to close process. If it's rejected, we either go back to the negotiation table or we say, you know what? Not today. Okay. So that's kind of the different pathways that you're looking at when it comes to negotiation. So what we're going to look at is how we kind of establish that negotiation to come to that win-win. Okay. Okay. I'm going to ask you one of those trick questions again, and it's one of those questions that the answer is on your screen. Okay. But you guys have to play. So who, as a real estate agent, who do you negotiate with? Somebody come off mute and tell me.
The seller's agent.
Yeah, the agent on the other side, right? If you're a buyer's
yeah.
agent, the seller's agent. If you're a seller's agent, the buyer's agent. Sorry, Jeff, I missed that.
The agent on the other side of the transaction.
Yep, the agent on the other side of the table, for sure. Who else?
Your clients.
Your clients, right? Helping them find the, as we're guiding them, you know, like we said earlier, um, that negotiating with our clients generally is not that kind of win-lose sort of feeling. It sometimes is helping them see things from a different angle, collaborating with them to look at, maybe they're really zeroed in on the closing date, and we're negotiating to say, hey, can we look at the big picture to see if you know, there might be better alignment in other areas. So those are the two parties that are going to be negotiating. We're negotiating with our own client, and then we are negotiating with the agent on the other side of the transaction. Okay.
Jamie, I was going to agree
Yeah.
with you on, I was thinking that as you were talking, it's really, I think, going back to when you're negotiating their motivation in a way that you're not, like you said, it's not like move forward or back off. It's kind of like reminding them of what they're, why they're doing what they're doing, you know, timelines, you know, situations of financial burdens or whatever, you know, that's always going to be that. I think that needs to be, I wouldn't say negotiated, but maybe just like reminders.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times when we negotiate with our clients, we are doing exactly that. We're setting them reminders of, like, here's what you said you want. And here's what you said was important, and just kind of reiterating and reminding is a lot of the negotiating that we do with our own clients. Okay. I really like the visual on this page. It's very simple, and I think it's really clear on just showing how that communication and that collaboration and that negotiation takes place. So at the bottom of your screen, you're looking at the seller's agent and the seller, and they collaborate together, right? They're doing some negotiation here. And then our seller's agent and our buyer's agent, they're doing some negotiation here. And our buyer's agent and our buyer are having their own collaboration and negotiation happening. So another not a trick question. In this situation, again, just look at the visual on your screen. Who are the only two folks who we don't see directly negotiating with each other?
Buyer and seller.
Right, your buyer and seller. The clients are not negotiating back and forth between each other. That is literally the reason they hired you, right? Was so that they didn't have to do that, because it's not necessarily easy for everyone who doesn't go through Ignite and learn how to do it well, right? So that's one of your key duties as an agent. Okay. So when we talk about, we talked a little bit about what kind of things we negotiate with our own clients. What are some of the things that the two agents are likely negotiating about when it comes into a transaction? So unmute or throw it in the chat. What are some of the things that get negotiated?
Price of the home.
Price, yeah.
Inspections.
Inspection. Tell me more, Sandy.
Well, when you get your inspection reports back, the buyers and the agents go over it and determine what they would like to ask for, and then the buyer's agent then reaches out to the listing agent, conveys that, and tries to work things out between the two.
Gotcha. So like an inspection resolution.
Correct.
Okay. Yep. Closing date. Extras, yeah, the conveyances, appliances, or things that are going to go on a bill of sale. Closing costs, home warranties, commissions. Man, y'all are good at this. There's a lot of different things that get negotiated between our two agents. However, even though there's a lot of different things that get negotiated, they generally fall into only two categories. Okay? What do you think those two categories are? Think high level.
Price and terms.
Price and terms. That's really it, Sandy. Those are the things that we're going to negotiate. So when we talk about price, that's usually the primary factor. That's where a lot of negotiation might happen. And we're talking about the sale price of the property. And then when we talk about terms, we're talking about other financial things. That's where those closing costs and home warranties come in. The conveyances, the commissions, um, all of those other financially based things that are not the price of the home, or they're time based things like dates and deadlines and things like that, that are getting negotiated here. Generally, things fall into these two categories, right? Okay. So when we look at the things y'all mentioned, so price falls into price. Closing date, does closing date fall into price or terms?
Terms.
Terms, okay? Another price. So extras and conveyances, do those fall into price or terms? Or other?
Terms.
Yeah. Price is really, it's just that. It's just the price of the home itself or the land itself, the property. And terms generally covers everything else. Okay? Okay. So now we're going to look at a quick little model to keep in the back of your head as you go into your negotiations for your clients. Okay. So this is what we call the 3Ps approach. Okay. So as we've talked about, negotiation is, it's a skill. It's not a muscle that most of us are born with it being super strong, which is a lot of the reason why real estate agents get hired, is so that clients don't have to negotiate directly. And to follow this simple process is a really easy way for you to be able to be good at this negotiating without it having to be complicated, right? Complicated makes things difficult generally. Okay. So generally what we're looking at with our 3Ps is step 1, prepare. We know that preparation is the key to building confidence in ourselves, and ensuring a smooth negotiation process. Knowing the information that we're going to talk about, and the answers to the questions before we go running headlong into the wind. Okay. Then taking that information we've prepared and presenting it, moving into the actual negotiation process by presenting the offer, counter offer, right? That's all these are when we're talking about negotiations, is just offers and counter offers going back and forth, in response to the initial offer. Okay. And then we move to a position, right? So we kind of shift our position and our stance, for our clients, and we shift them, right? So we get a little bit closer, and then we go, well, what if? And that shifts them a little bit closer, and maybe it offsets. And then we say, what if? So that what if is where we find that position, where we have that agreement, where we come to that win-win. So we're going to prepare that information, present that information, and then adjust the positions, and be aware of those adjustments of the clients on both sides to get to that situation where we come to the win-win. Okay. So we're going to go a little bit deeper into each one of these. When we talk about preparation, these are the things that means. Okay. So know your goal. You want to have a clear goal of what a win-win means to your client, where the buyer and seller are both going to be happy with the outcome. And this is where we might do a little negotiation with our client, like Michelle mentioned, right? Where we're saying, reminding them of what their motivation is. Why do you need to buy or sell? Are you moving? What those factors are, and doing that reminder for them. That's going to sometimes come into finding that goal and knowing that goal. You want to know your client. Hopefully you've already got a really good idea of where they're at, but now we're at the negotiating table, so you really have to understand, you know, is price more important or is closing date or XYZ? Start to prioritize things with them of, while all of it's important as a package, what is your number one priority? What's your number two priority? And start to identify those things where they're not going to be budgeable and where they have a little bit more flexibility. Okay. We want to start to think ahead. So kind of looking at what the other party is looking for, what is their objective, so that we can kind of see a path forward on what we expect them to do, so that we may kind of build out some additional counters of if-then situations. All right. We want to set those expectations. So both of for our client and for the other party, setting those expectations for what you're going to get out of this. So, you know, when we're always setting expectations with our client, we want to promise what we think we can get here and then negotiate till we get to the absolute win for them, right? Making sure that we're kind of doing the under promise over deliver, like I know I can accomplish this, but then go above and beyond and make sure you're getting them to the right place. Okay. You want to be informed. So keep in mind that you, especially if you're a newer agent, may just not know what you don't know. So a good kind of rule of thumb is to talk to your broker or talk to another agent and kind of get their scoop on things. Let them know what's going on with the offer, the counter offer, what your client's stance is on their side, what their terms that are important to them are, and ask them their opinions and their thoughts, so that you have that additional kind of resource of having the expertise of people who've played this game before. Okay. Number 6, obey the laws. Y'all, that one's important. Don't break the rules. Make sure you're following the guidelines in your state and with your local board or association. And then know those documents inside and out, right? We talked about this when we were in the last section in session 17, knowing those, the contracts, the addendums, things like that. Know those backwards, forwards, and upside down, so that you know where things can be changed, where things are, they kind of are what they are, and what general area needs to be adjusted based on both of the client's needs. Okay. All right. So when we're talking about preparing, one of the ways that we can do a good job is to just ask questions, right? You've got this in your book as well. So in your participant guide, you've got the rundown of what these questions are and how asking those questions is going to set you up clearly, right? On what points your what points your client, you know, this is a non-negotiable for them. You're going to get that insight on what kind of leverage you may have available. Okay. You're going to get those expectations set, like we just talked about on the previous slide, expectations on both sides. You're going to find out more about your client and zero in a little bit more on what their goals are in the negotiation. And then understanding what does a win-win look like? Where do we have to get to for your client for that to be a win for them? And then having that same kind of conversation on what's non-negotiable and where do we get to a win with the agent on the other side to come to those conclusions. So as we're asking those questions, keep in mind that there's two different types of questions, right? We have open-ended questions, which are things like explain. It allows the person who you're asking, it gives them the kind of runway to give you a sentence or several sentences in answer. Okay. When we look at closed-ended questions, those are a short one answer question, usually a word or 2 words or a very short response, not really any elaboration there. So you can see those examples on your screens of kind of what those look like and the different options. We generally recommend that you use open-ended questions when you are asking your client questions about the terms of the negotiation. Why do you think that using open-ended questions might be more beneficial as we're gathering additional information from our clients?
They require a more detailed answer, which gives you better insight as to what their needs might be.
Yeah, you get more insight. There's going to give you a more detailed information. Jennifer says you find out more. Zdenka says it gives you more room for negotiation. I also like to think that there's no assumptions when you ask an open-ended question. If I say, if we got to 500,000, would that work for you? I've made an assumption of that number, right? I've created a number in my head. It didn't come from my client, that number. So I'm kind of putting the idea in their head. So keeping in mind that we are trying not to influence them, just to guide them, I think that's also an important factor of open-ended questions. Okay. So we're going to dig in a little more specifically on a few types of questions. Number 1, what would happen if? Okay. So when we ask what would happen if, this gives us an idea to kind of anticipate and kind of vision cast a little bit, look into the future. What would happen if? Okay. So that potentially it sets you up for even being able to respond to that situation. One of the things we can do with what would happen if is we can take that and spin it positive, and we can take that and spin it negative, right? What would happen if we were able to get this deal under contract? What does that look like? Okay. What would happen if we don't get this deal under contract? So you can kind of take that in a positive, negative direction to get different feedback on that. And then every 3-year-old's favorite question, why?
Hey, Jamie, I was just going to ask you. I feel like the if questions are almost like a yes no question because it's like very conditional on one point. So I feel like open-ended questions are more. Were you saying that if questions are open-ended? I missed that. I'm sorry. I kind of.
So in talking about what would happen if questions.
Right. But to me, it just seems like it's kind of like a one answer, like a yes or no kind of. It's not really, was this under open-ended? I'm kind of, I'm
Yeah,
missing
these are a
that.
specific type of open-ended question.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Not like an if-then question, but a what would happen if question. So a little bit different there, open-ended. And then, like I said, this is every 3-year-old's favorite question. Why? Why is this important to you? And this is really just taking whatever their answer was and peeling off another layer, right? And saying, let's go one level deeper. Why is that important? Okay. I also am a big fan of tell me more about, right? This is another way to just go one level deeper to get more information about where the priorities lie. Okay. All right. So now we understand what we're going to do to prepare, right? We're going to have some really good conversations with our client. Then we're going to present. So when we go into presenting, this is when we're talking with the other agent. Ideally you're able to do this in a phone conversation or a Zoom or in person, so that you have some of these context clues from how somebody responds. We want to keep quiet once you present the offer. Allow them time to kind of accept the information, if you will, to digest it a little bit and run their thoughts through. You want to listen carefully to what's important to the other party, right? You're getting the information on where their key components are so that you can kind of mesh those together with what your client's key components are. We want to stay calm and relaxed. Again, we're in control. We've got this in the bag, just like we talked about earlier. You want to focus on the customer's needs, both sets of customers, right? You're negotiating on behalf of your customer. And then you always want to set yourself up to give your offer the best chance. So you never want to come in with things like, I know this is a little bit of a low ball, right? Don't ever say something like that, because you are you're setting yourself up in the negative for that offer, right? So never use any sort of terms that are going to decrease the value of that offer for your client. Okay. We always want to keep things as positive as possible and keep our emotions really calm and relaxed and in control. Okay. And keep in mind that as we present this and we start this negotiating back and forth, maintaining that positivity and respect as we're going throughout this conversation and this negotiation, which may be several conversations, is really important that we stay professional and we stay positive, because even if for some reason this deal doesn't get to, we don't move forward, we don't get into that contract to close situation, it's likely that at some point in your career, you'll work with this agent again, right? So keep in mind that every time you start a negotiation with somebody, you're building the relationship you have with them that's going to reflect on your future transactions with them as well. Okay? Just a few things to keep in mind as we present and we go back and forth with that other agent. Okay? So then the final piece of our little P puzzle is positioning. So anytime we find a common ground, we want to call it out or acknowledge that the other person has called it out, saying yes, saying, yeah, we totally agree there. On anything, it could be the small things, and you can work your way up to the kind of main positions. Continue to just ask questions. Ask things like, what would happen if in this situation? What would be the number? How can we get to a place that makes sense? What if we, things like that are going to get you the details of clarity on that common ground. Okay. Know that positioning is a process. So sometimes it's not as simple as, well, what if we did this? And then the other party's like, yeah, let's do it, right? Sometimes it's back and forth several times before you can come to an agreement. And sometimes it's you and I, as agents, we have the conversation and we get more additional feedback from the other person. And then we need to go both talk to our clients and take a little pause, talk to our clients, and come back to the negotiating table and talk between the agents and then go talk to our clients. So it's not always as simple as gathering that information ahead of time, going into the conversation, and then leaving that single conversation with everybody on the same page, right? And then keep in mind that it's not always going to come to a win-win situation. Not every scenario is going to work out, and that's okay. Make sure that you are representing your client's best interests in if they say, nope, I don't, we're not going to come to terms. I'm not willing to accept those terms. I'm not willing to budge on any of those things that are on the table. Then you have to be able to walk away and understand that not every single negotiation is going to end in a win-win. Okay. Hey, so we've talked about our 3 Ps. So we have talked about preparing, presenting, and then positioning and adjusting those positions. So that's kind of the art and process of negotiations. Any questions that y'all have on that front? Okay. All right, I've got a few best practices for you. We've talked a bit about all of these. Keeping it professional, keeping your clients' goals in mind. Pay attention to how you're communicating and the tone and the perceived tone that might come across. Talk about your client's motivation, right? Reminding them of what those motivations are. Don't reveal too much. You always want to listen as much as you can and not be talking and talking and talking, whether you're negotiating with the client or with the other party. And then don't have a win in your head that has to be the right outcome. Okay. Don't have a picture in your head of what that win-win looks like unless it's just the collaboration. Okay. Just some last minute tips. All right, one last time. I know we snuck in there just after the hour, but do me a huge favor if you would be so kind as to scan the magic QR code, go to kwueval.com and give us some quick feedback before you jump off for the night. This is the last little bit of your session before you dig into your homework and making those contacts and connections that are going to help you grow your business. So again, this is a virtual session online. My name is not in the magic dropdown under instructor, so you're going to select instructor not in dropdown, please. And then please type in my name. My name is Jamie Henley if you think I did a great job. If not, my name is Bryn Hardway. Just kidding, that's somebody who I work with. Don't put her name in there. Okay. And this course is Ignite 18, Negotiate Offers. So we covered them both tonight. Just a quick reminder that Thursday night, you do have that option to go a little deeper on the technology side of things. I know we mentioned Command several times, and we talked a little bit about the Command app and the consumer app. So those Thursday night calls are going to be a great opportunity for you guys to dig a little bit deeper there. Okay. All right, my friends, I'm going to keep this up on my screen. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask those now. Good night to everyone. If you do not have questions, feel free to jump off. But if you do, feel free to stay and I will get those answered. Thank you all so much. Have a great evening.